What's up, guys? We are on episode number 2 of the Artist Emancipation podcast, and I'm so fucking excited because I'm here with one of my favorite people in the world who happens to live halfway across the world, Miss Gabriella Rosie. How are you, my dear?
I'm so good. I'm so excited to be. We haven't spoken in so long, like on a call. So I'm just excited to talk to you. I'm so excited that your podcast exists and I get to chat with you on it.
Dude, I
It's
know.
going to be a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I've told everybody in my circle that I'm obsessed with my mentor, and nobody knows who my mentor is. And I'm like, it's this fucking brilliant on the internet. So this is her, guys. Like, if you're watching this and listening to this for the first time, this is the girl who has literally changed my life for the better over the past 2 years, 2 or 3 years now. And
Wow.
and
Wow.
I can remember initially finding you, and I just absolutely loved the energy that you put out. And I was like, now, see, that's what I want to do. You just you inspire without doing anything in particular. I feel like that's why I love you so much. But she is an amazing artist. She dabbles in, I can't even give you an artist title, which I love. You're into pottery, you do illustration, you're a fucking genius in every aspect of. Tell us a little bit about your journey of being an artist and just how you grew up and how you got to where you are now.
Okay. I think, I think most people are artists I think everybody can be an artist when they're a kid, but that's a whole of a story that we can get into. But I always just loved creating stuff as a kid, always wanted to paint things, draw things, like cut things up, make up like my own magazines and whatever it was. And so it's always just been a thing that I did. Like making stuff has always been a thing that I did. And when I got on the internet, when I was 13 or whatever, and I was like, oh my God, I can make my own little website and I can share the things that I'm making. I can find other people. I mean, the things I was making at that time were very, no one, I'm so glad I cannot find them online anymore. But just being able to find other people who are into the weird little makey shit that we're into
Absolutely.
was life changing. And I think, through going to uni, the whole time I was at uni, I was studying psychology, but spending way more time taking outfit photos and making weird dresses out of 90s bed sheets and Barbie doll limbs and all this weird shit and sharing that on the internet and spending way more time doing that than I was studying my actual degree. And, just finding people online who were doing it as their actual job, really seeing that breakout, growing up through that breakout of, oh, normal people can use the internet. You don't have to be a .com bro to use the internet, but you can just talk about the things you like to wear and the things you like to create and the books that are turning you on. And through doing that, you can build an audience. I was like, this is fucking insane. And I want to not only soak that up from other people, but I want to be able to contribute to it myself. I want to share my perspective and make a space for myself that way. And I think I'd love to have and then I did this one thing and then that's my job. But like you said, we like to do a lot of different things and it's just been constantly evolving and being able to use the internet as a space to grow and evolve as a creative just feels like the most fun thing that just happens to also be somehow my job as well.
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't know if that summarizes anything of what I do, but
Yeah.
that's how I feel.
Yeah. And then I will say too, from when I first came in contact with Gabby, I think what you were doing when I very first came across your Instagram was the card decks. And I was like, oh
Yes.
shit, that's so cool. And you were one of the first people, at least that I noticed, that was illustrating their own and then producing their own. And you were truly the artist behind the whole concept. And up until that point in my career, it was always client based. So when I found you, I was like, oh, she's doing what she wants and she's fucking making money doing it. what disconnect do I have that I think I only have to work for other people, right? So I think in my brain, I was like, you were the first like self-made artist that I had seen that was successful enough to be doing her own thing, which I think is so fucking cool. And as you evolved, like obviously you mentor people, you create fucking hella cool communities for artists, which is another reason that I really loved like watching you. It's all these things that I didn't know that I necessarily struggled with. Like I think you can even like speak to this. We talked for the first time, you're like, so what are you involved in? I'm like, oh, I sit behind my computer and I fucking like do graphic talk to anybody. Like you're the first. I remember being so fucking nervous to talk to you for the first time, just like this, because I
Oh
was
my God.
literally, I don't do this, right? So the fact that you have a multifaceted business where you're an artist first and foremost, and then you build communities for artists, and then you're just fucking you, and you make money in all aspects of it, and I fucking love it, and it's genius.
Oh my God, you're too fucking cute. You're too sweet. But that's what I really like about the content that you create and the message that you put out and I can see you stepping even more and more into that, which I love to see,
Baby.
is I think it can be so natural for a lot of us to want to create. And I mean, most artists have, a big like introverted side to them. Most of us, like, we like to be in our own space that we've created, obsessively doing the things that we want to do. And that is so beautiful. And I think that is our strength. But I think also in that, it's kind of I don't know, it's like our responsibility to share that world we're building with other people, because other people want that. Other people desperately want to engage with that, to know other people even function and live like that as well. And I think that is the tool what the internet is fucking so powerful for, specifically for creators. And I know we've had conversations about AI and like the next wave of the internet before, and I don't see it as a threat at all. I actually see it as the biggest opportunity for human creatives to be
Yeah.
like, this is the world I live in, and I'm ready to take up my space and, put myself in my own spotlight and use these tools, use these resources as a way to share my perspective, as a way to share the things that I'm obsessed with, the things that I create. And really knowing that it doesn't have to be anything that you don't even want to do. It doesn't
Right.
have to be this big, scary thing. You can be the most introverted person and do it in exactly your way, and it can work beautifully. Like, it comes from that source understanding that you can have an idea and you can search online and you can take courses, or you can spend hours and hours and months and years figuring out, okay, I have this idea for a deck, I have this idea for a book or a series or whatever it is, and I'm going to learn how to do it, and I'm going to be so fucking audacious to put it out into the world because I want to and I can.
Right. Right.
And that is what I
People
love.
right. And I always tell people like, because people get so stuck on the details of like how to do something. So like if they wanted to make a card deck, they'd be like, I don't know how to contact a printer. I don't know what program to use.
Mhm.
So I always say like what makes a true creative is like you have the curiosity to do so. Like if you're really truly creative, you will go online. It takes a fucking Google search nowadays, like right? Like
Mhm.
you figure it out. Like, and that's how new processes are formed. Like you're doing something your way, you're figuring it out, and you fucking do it. And then it's like bing bang boom, there you are. Like I think people who and this isn't to say that like taking courses on stuff is absolutely bullshit for an artist, because I think it's very well worth it. It's like me going to art school. I think I needed to do that in order to get the foundation.
Totally.
Like
And like the course can just be a shortcut. Like, you don't need it, but if you have the resources available and you're like, look, you've done this before, just give me the blueprint for it.
yes.
It's that like rocket fuel to something, but you also don't need it, you
Right.
know?
I'm like, if you are one of those people that do need it, like make sure you're not stopping there, right? Like
Exactly.
that information and put it into your project, put it into your creative brain, because I see way too many people just like ABC, cool, done. And we've talked about like making versus creating. And this is like a conversation that I
Mm.
really fucking love to have with you, because you have such a good perspective on what the difference between making something is and then creating something. So speak on that a little bit, because I don't want to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So making something comes when you're following a blueprint, and the things can overlap, and they probably eventually will overlap when you do something long enough. But when you're creating something, that thing doesn't exist yet. And it might be either it doesn't exist in the world at all, but mostly it doesn't exist in the very specific way that only you can make something. So with card decks, for example, there are so many card decks in the world. I didn't invent a fucking card deck, right? But there was, I was like, oh, there isn't a card deck that speaks in the style or the energy that I wish there was a card deck. There isn't one that speaks in my voice, and I wish that existed. So I better figure out how to make that happen.
Right.
And the creative element is a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of having an idea, which usually just feels like a sense, like a feeling of, I want this kind of thing to exist. I want this like hole in my heart in the world to be filled, but I don't know exactly what's going to fill it or like how I can fill it. And I think that is something that as creatives, we can be so overwhelmed and frustrated by until we realize that's what excites us. That is like the energy that we're like compels us to act, compels us to do the things, like to figure it out, to go through the effort of learning the skills that will be required. And it's very easy to look for what is the 10 step to this thing. What are the simple steps for me to follow that somebody else has done before and I can copy and paste and make the same thing, versus how do I absolutely like learn from the resources, learn from the people who've come before you, and if there are ways that you can infuse that kind of making energy into your process. But there is a power that comes with stepping into the true bravery and vulnerability that is creating something, because it's kind of admitting to yourself, I'm going to be frustrated a lot,
Yeah.
and I'm going to make a lot of mistakes, and things aren't going to work out all the time because I'm literally inventing something from
Yes.
scratch.
Yes.
And that inventing is the thing, it's the product, it's the finished piece, but it's also you as a person and you as the creative, like understanding what your voice is, creating your style and way of approaching and expressing yourself. And I say this all the time, that art is communication. And I think because creatives are usually little weirdos, or I should say, I don't necessarily feel satisfied with just having like the normal day-to-day style of communication.
Right.
And in that, that's why I feel so driven to be like, well, I can't necessarily get what I want to share with the world out in just me moving through my everyday life. So let me make all these extravagant paintings and learn ceramics and learn how to make videos and learn how to do all these different things, because in that I'm creating these little pockets of things I want to exist in the world. I'm creating a space for myself to exist and to share my perspective or my desires about the world. That was a very like abstract, convoluted way of describing making versus creating. But ultimately, creating is messy. Creating doesn't have a blueprint for it, and you are literally creating that. As redundant as that might sound, you are going in with like goggles on that you can't barely see through, and you're trying to see like, is this the thing, is this the thing, and like bring these pieces together. And eventually through the process you make something that wouldn't have existed without you putting that effort in.
100%.
So it's big stuff.
I love it because it made me, well, it made me look at how I do my own work. And I'm like, I'm
Mm.
when it comes to like my designs, and I'm willing to sit there and be fucking pissed at the computer for 12 hours because I can't get something to look right. And because of this conversation, I have never looked again at like a piece of design work to inspire my work. Like it's comes straight from my,
Mm.
that's just how I work. Right. And so I found with a lot of people that I teach graphic design to, they have problems not looking at inspiration and not looking at things such as like other images and shit like that. So, what would your advice be to somebody who's really just starting to understand the concept of making versus creating and how to get into that creating flow space?
Absolutely. This is why you go to art school, right? I think what you learn in art school is actually making and the skills of making. And your art school might be literally going to a school and following a curriculum, or your art school might be finding people whose graphic design or paintings that you like and you literally replicating that thing. And I think that we've spoken about this concept of copying and everything a lot before. And I think it's okay for you to replicate another painting. This is what you would literally learn in art school. Like, look, study the masters, see what they've done. You don't then go on and be like, I made this painting. This is a thing that I created. You use it as a tool to practice, to learn, to like see through the lens of like how someone's made something. I think what I love is like looking super close at the artists that I admire and their work and being like, how have they made this thing? Like, can I figure out the mechanics of that? And really breaking down the elements of how is a thing made? What are the actual techniques of making a thing? There is, to be like super philosophical about it, there is like a Buddhist proverb, and it says, it's about someone who went to art school. They studied painting and they studied for like 10 years and they replicated every single, great piece, and they learned it so intricately and they learned every single technique. And this is what you do with your brushes. And these are the things that you use. And then after going through like the most strenuous training, they took like 5 years and was just a gardener, and they didn't paint, they didn't pick up a paintbrush, didn't do anything. And then they went back and they sat down and they were able to create because they learned the mechanics of this is what you need to know. These are the techniques. This is how the thing is done. But then I think you also need a break from it. You don't necessarily need to go be a gardener for 5 years, but it's giving yourself some distance from what inspired you initially and the rules of how something is done, to be like, okay, I know that stuff. I have the kind of wax on, wax off, like sense, motor memory of the thing. But how do I want to do it? What's the thing that actually wants to come out of me? And it's using those lessons and techniques as a skill that you utilize in your own way. And from that, you're creating. And that's makes everything else, especially everything else in your own industry and your own area, kind of irrelevant. And I always say, like, don't look at, if you want to make a card deck, don't look at other card decks. Look at the books, look at movies that inspire you, look at color palettes from paintings. Like, why would you look at the thing that already exists if you want to create something different? Let yourself be inspired by whatever the fuck inspires you. And that might be a plan, that might be interior design, but you can bring the elements of that into actually creating something fresh that you truly want to make.
Yeah, that's fucking amazing. God damn it, I love when you explain stuff. I'm like, Gab, because me, I'm like 1 to 2 sentences, I'm done. You put it in such a beautiful art. I'm like, oh,
I'm like, give me a monologue. Let's go.
Gabby. But this is why I love this. This is, I had a question for you today, and this is going to tie right into it. But I've been seeing a lot lately of like, an artist can never separate from their work because they are their art type of quotes. So one, like, what is your opinion on that? And two, like, well, give me your opinion first, and then we'll go into part two.
Okay. I think I think it's both. Like it's you can separate and you can't separate.
Mhm.
And for me, like my art is who I am. And I think that's because I want it to be. And I don't think that has to be the case for everybody, or I don't think that has to be the case all the time. Like, not every single thing I put out into the world is like, this is the core of who I am on a soul level.
Yeah.
But everything, even if it's like an Instagram story, or if it's like the simplest thing that you've put out and you've created, there is still a degree of vulnerability with that, because it is you sharing yourself, it is you sharing your perspective. And if it's not, then I think it's not going to be as satisfying as it could be.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not going to feel as good as it could, in my
Right.
opinion. Might not work for everyone.
I mean, you're
And
pretty.
I think that's something that you really have to consider, especially when it comes to social media and putting out content and sharing your art. It's like, how close do I want this to be to who I am as a person? And does that make sense for the business that I'm running? And I think this is something that across different industries, people can have a kind of existential crisis about. But look, if you are running a business for running a business, then it doesn't have to be like, this is the core of who I am. If you are running like a burger restaurant, there might be elements of you in that, but it doesn't have to be everything you share, everything you post has to be like, does this burger recipe like resonate with me on a soul level?
Right.
So
Right.
there's like levels to it. But for me, I think the most satisfying thing is using my expression as my creative outlet as my expression. Like, that's what
Yeah.
feels good for me. And in that, I know when I lean deeper into what I really want to say, it feels better and it connects with people way more deeply, because
Yeah.
it is that true communication. So
Yes.
for me, I'm like, there is no separation. And I think that's why we can have a lot of vulnerability around what we create, because it's like, this is a piece of me. Do you like it?
Did you
You
laugh?
know?
Yeah. No, I've been thinking about it for the past, like week and a half now, and every time I think about it, like I can sway one or two ways, and
Tell me your thoughts. How
yeah,
are you thinking about it now?
I love the way you described it though, because for me, what I've had to do the past several months as I've made this transition into who I want to become is kind of disconnect myself from my art, right? Like
Mm,
what what gets me is like it wasn't necessarily my art that I was disconnecting with. I was disconnecting more with the type of art that I wanted to do and like that persona of who I was. Like I was doing mainly client work. It was very hard for me to do personal work. So it was like, is that because a lot of artists would consider themselves artists or creators and all they do is client work. So it's like
mm,
said, if you're infusing that work with a piece of you and it's part of you and you're expressing, even if it's for a client, then fuck yeah, it's art and you can't separate yourself from that because it's a piece of you. But like in terms of me, it was my techniques, it was my process, it was these things, but was my emotion going into it? Not really. Like
mm,
me, I think it's very important if you're doing client based work to be able to separate yourself from that. But if you're an artist like a painter or you're a self-made artist like you absolutely want to have a piece of you in every single thing that you do, you know? So like my head goes back and fucking forth because like episode 1 you'll hear me talk about like I had to step back from my art for a little bit and I'm just like okay, but what did I really mean by that, right?
yeah, that is such an important distinction, because it's true. Like, every piece of client work that you've created has you all over it. Like, your essence, your style is all over the thing, but also so is your client's essence and style. And it has that, like, when you're creating for somebody else, especially, it's always going to have a compromise in it. It's always going to be a balance between your creative energy and expression and what the client wants. And this is where things can be like, there's no right or wrong. It's like, what is the brief? And the brief might be a client brief, or the brief might be, I want to create this thing that expresses me at a certain level. Like whatever the thing is, the ability for you to be able to switch between that and understand that is such a beautiful and powerful skill as well. But I think what you said is like, it's so helpful for you to be able to be aware of that distinction and to be able to have that, be aware of that separation, even of like, oh, this isn't my entire, I don't have to put my entire purpose and, you know, artist statement in everything that I create for clients, because that's not even the job. That's not what they want, and that's not what's required of you. And then in doing that, that really frees you to be like, okay, well, what is the stuff that you want to make for you? Because that's where you can put your whole heart into it.
A whole ass goes into that shit, baby.
Whole ass.
I love it. And then the part two of that question is, because you're infusing yourself with every piece of art that you're putting out there, are there certain things that you do in your life to create more emotion, to create more experience, so that you have, I don't want to say inspiration because I think that's like a bullshit term, but like, so that I just like to call it the experience that goes into the artwork. Like sometimes you can't create unless you have this experience. So do you find yourself kind of putting yourself out there more, or doing things that you wouldn't normally do just to like get that emotion going?
I definitely feel that like we need to have input in order to have output.
Yes.
And I think that idea of experience and inspiration, like where the source of the input, right? It can be in huge things and it can be in really tiny things as well. Like a trip around the world can be as inspiring to me as like going on a walk and just like letting ideas come to me, or like seeing how beautiful
No,
just my neighborhood is.
this bitch like went on a, how long was it? 12-day silent retreat? Was it
Oh
12?
my God, God. A 10-day silent retreat, right? And so she's crazy. She's crazy. But like in that, right? That is an extreme thing to do, right? It takes a specific type of person to opt to do that, to volunteer themselves for that. But also like it's doing nothing, you know? Like it's a big thing. And at the same time, I'm just sat on a mat for like 9 hours a day. But in that experience showed me so much of like, God, there's so many ideas in me already. And
Yeah.
I think I love that you was hesitant to even use the word inspiration, because I know we've spoke about this before, of like, we can feel like we have to constantly be on this huge archaeological dig of, I need to find the next thing, and where's the next idea, and is it going to come here, and I've got to curate these Pinterest boards, and I've got to live this really outlandish extravagant life, or I have to do all these big things to have ideas. And that's literally not true. Like guaranteed, every single person listening to this, like you and I, we have enough ideas in us right now to like occupy us for infinity.
Right.
Like we don't actually need more stuff. And even the more that whatever idea, like I always say, the best idea is the one that you have right now that feels most exciting to you. And I think it's really easy for us to get ahead of ourselves. And especially if you are an ambitious artist, to be like, yeah, but what's coming next? And what's the big plan of this? And what's the big vision of this? I fucking love to do that. But it's also not really that helpful or meaningful, because when I take action on whatever idea is exciting to me now, like the whole path in front of me instantly transforms, because I get new ideas, because I get clarity on like, oh, that other idea that I thought was hot shit, don't want to do it at all anymore. So like wasted all this time planning it out, planning this big vision out, because it constant, like the landscape constantly changes, and your dreams and your ideas, you're going to constantly be getting new ones when you stay in motion, and you don't actually have to do huge things, to have like lightning bolt ideas that are so exciting.
Yeah.
It's actually not that dramatic being an artist,
I
you
agree.
know?
People always have like, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is like people always have like these misconceptions of like what an artist is, and like, yeah, we're fucking weird and we're fucking like out there sometimes, but sometimes we're completely fucking normal. But like one of them is like the tortured artist, that we always have to be putting ourselves through like fucking misery or emotional torture and like just to get an output. And it's like, I don't think I've ever purposely done that in my entire life. Like,
We're like, no, not for me, sorry.
to me, I'm like, yeah, I get it. If you go through something traumatic, like obviously you're going to produce art about it. Like, yes, that's a given, but to consciously like put yourself in situations to get a desired outcome, that almost isn't art to me, because it's like a pre-planned thing, you know? So,
Mm.
but the question for you is like, throughout your career, have you had these misconceptions put on you? And if so, like, what were they?
I think it is a like it's a big pervasive idea in, I think maybe it's lessening now, but the idea of the tortured artist, or the idea that the best art is made from pain,
Yeah.
is a, and the truth is great art is made from pain, but great art is also made from every other human experience and every other human emotion.
Yes.
And I think people can get into this really weird space, that tortured artist space, of being like, maybe they look up to a creative who has made, maybe they've made an album from like a really dark period in their life, and they're like, oh, well, then that's what I have to do to make something that will resonate with people as much. Or maybe they've personally had an experience where they have created something from a really difficult time, and it's given them a level of success, so they think they have to replicate that over and over again.
Right.
Whereas the truth, when you break it down, is it's resonated because they've created something that's real. And I think real is a very like, what does that mean? Like, it's said so much, but you've created something from a true place. You've created something from a true drive. And I think what I love about art that can be made from a difficult place is if you think about the artist creating from that space, they're using their creativity as a tool to heal and a tool to process their emotions. So even if it's coming from a really dark place, it has this beautiful and hopeful energy around it. And I think we can like lose the sense of that and think, oh no, I have to feel shitty all the time. I have to feel terrible making the thing.
Yep.
That's not always the case. Like sometimes you might feel shitty and terrible, but you're using your creativity as this tool, as this way to not only create something you can share with other people, but heal it within yourself and like evolve past and through it in yourself. When I look to the things that most excite me, like the movies and the music, it is mostly like hopeful stuff, or it's silly shit, or it's happy shit, or it's, you know, it's the entire spectrum of human emotion. And I think this is something I've been thinking about a lot recently, even more so with just the fucking state of the world
Yeah.
and how things just feel like they're getting darker and darker. This is what I want to believe, right? I want to believe that it is an element of my purpose to be able to put beautiful things into the world, to put it in the direction that I want it to go,
Mm.
to
Yeah.
send to give people an experience that makes them feel a different way, that
Right.
allows me to step in through the creative process of, how do I want to feel? What do I want the world to look like? And we can use our art as a tool for that.
100%. And it's one of those things too where I think art is truly created because we want to connect with somebody else on that emotional level, right? So of course we're all going to have like the doom and gloom artwork, but that's not necessarily like what we want to connect over. We want to connect over like, I went through this, I'm here now, I was able to create this. So it's almost like art is like the past version of you that you're sharing with other people, and then like you as yourself after creating it are the hope and joy afterwards, right? So it's like the fact that you want to make and share beautiful things to like get people out of their everyday life and out of their everyday like fucking negative thinking, I think that's truly like a beautiful thing to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much art that I love that is created from a difficult space as well. And I think what we really need to do is acknowledge the full spectrum of it, and acknowledge the full spectrum not only in like what we appreciate, but also in what we can have success with. And I think that story of the tortured artist, and even, you know, the starving artist of, I can do this stuff, but it's never gonna
Right.
be lucrative. It's never gonna, I can't have it as a job. Like, we have to look at these things, these stories, these beliefs that feel true just because they've been said over and over again, and be like, is this true? Is this true for me? Is this true in the world now? I
Right.
don't think
No, it's not. And I'm so glad you brought up like starving artists, because
so.
like that shit is not real, guys. And like you would not believe how many people still believe that. And it's like, because I'm an artist, because I love what I do, I'm not going to get paid for it.
Right.
What the fuck?
And that, dude, how, look, if we don't think the thing, I don't even think this is in like a very like energetic and manifesting space. Like, it is, but it's also very logical thinking.
Yeah,
If you don't think you can make money from your art, how the fuck are you going to make money from your art? Because
right.
you're not going to make yourself available. You're not going to put it out into the world. You're literally like, we think that when people talk about creative blocks, we think that's something that's put upon us. It's actually so, like, it's a wall we're holding up ourselves. Like,
Yeah.
it's a shield we're putting in front of us. And it can feel like, oh, I have to break down, I have to do all these things to break down these blocks. Just throw the fucking shield away. Like, why are you holding on to this shield? Like, you don't want it. That's not what, it doesn't even, you don't need it. Like, there's no one even trying to fucking attack you, bro. Like, drop the shield and be like, oh, the world's changed. Things are literally different now. And, you know, I think about this a lot because it, the change in being able to be a thriving artist and stepping away from that struggling artist, starving artist, it being difficult to build a career, the like logistical change of that is actually very, very recent. And I think even growing up, as I was saying earlier, with like the rise of the internet and being able to use the internet as a means to share you as an individual, to build a personal brand and share what you create, all of that, so recent.
Right.
That is so, so recent. And even if I think back to like my parents' generation, like if I think back to my mum, like my mum's always been creative, but when
Mhm.
she was my age, she did not have the accessibility of the tools that I have available, like literally on my phone.
Right.
She wasn't able to like build, like open a shop with ease and be able to send things to people all around the world. So it makes sense that these stories are still really, like, still held really strong in people and in society because it's very recent. The change, a lot of the change is very recent. But I think if we pay attention to be like, oh, like there is a shit ton of people doing the exact thing that you want to do. And it's only becoming more and more accessible and more widespread. And then it becomes a game of, oh, where am I holding myself back? And it's that level of responsibility of like, am I ready to be brave enough to like share myself and to share my art and to face the, I think it's even the fear of facing the possibility that it might not work. And sometimes when the opportunity for it to be successful becomes higher, then people can get into this really silly spiral of like, well, if the options are more, if the opportunities are more and it still doesn't work, then I'm a fucking piece of shit. Instead of being like, it's worth taking the chance, it's worth you pursuing your creativity because it feels good to do that. And whatever comes out of that is the cherries on top anyway.
So true. And it's like messy action is better than no action. Like I always tell people, it's crazy to me that you wouldn't step foot in the arena and just do something and see what it's like and like start to understand, because of course you learn by doing things, right? You learn by experience. And some people never fucking take that step because they're too scared, or they're too, I see a lot of people get too detail oriented up front. So they're like, I have to know the business logistics. I have to know this. I have to know this. I have to see if it's worth my while. And I'm like, that's, you can't do that. Like you have to put your whole in and then you build from the ground up. Like it's never worth your while, right? Like because I have a firm belief that as an artist and creator, like we'd be doing this shit anyway in some way, shape, or form if it wasn't our livelihood, if we didn't have the internet, right? Like we would be creating somehow, some way.
100%. There is a line in, I'm reading The Artist's Way right now, and there's a line in the chapter that I just read, and she says, people are so afraid that they're never going to make it as a full-time artist that they don't even let themselves be a part-time artist.
Ooh,
And it's like, how are you going to get to the next thing if you don't even let yourself be where you are?
it's so
And I think even more like what you were saying, like even more than I get it. I so desperately wanted art to be my job. And it's like that desperation and that stubbornness that made it my job. But also, I would be making things anyway. Like if you are an artist, you're an artist, and that's a separate thing to whether that pays your bills. And I think that's a really important distinction to make, whether you want to be a full-time artist or not. Like even maybe even more so, like when you have art as your job, you still have to realize that you want to make art regardless of the monetary aspect of it.
yeah.
And that's when shit gets tricky, and that's when we can step away very easily from creating and go into that making territory where you're like, well, this worked before, so let me just repeat the same old thing. And suddenly you might have a business that's built on the things that you're making, but are you a satisfied artist? Are you creating the things? Are you allowing yourself to grow and express yourself if you're just churning out the same old shit that you think people want?
Right.
Probably not.
Yeah. And I talk about in episode 1, it's like one of the 3 things that I list that every artist has to come home to. And the last one is evolution. And it's become a scenario. Like that's where I was, where I was like, I'm literally just making fucking shit over and over and over. And I'm not like, I'm going fucking nuts. Like, what do I need to change in order to keep up with myself? Right. Because like as creatives, like we get so fucking bored so fast. And that's why I tell people, like, yeah, you may think you're going to do that for the rest of your life, but you're absolutely not going to. Like, it's probably going to change within the month, right? So it's like,
literally.
so it's like all those signs start to happen, and that's how you know, like, it's time to like fucking evolve with the next level of you, whatever that may be, whether it's like trying out a new fucking item for sale. Like, if you guys have not ever heard of Gabby before, go check out her merch store too, because she has, of course, she has fucking merch. She's doing, what are you doing now? You're doing like, I know
What
that.
am I doing now? I mean, as we're recording this, I have a ceramic drop going live in like 5 minutes.
So I was like,
But I'm doing like, this is something that like, it's the idea of being a multi-passionate, right? And I think when you let yourself follow the different things that you want to create, like I could very easily be like, do I need to add ceramics into my business? Not at all. Do I want to? Absolutely. And has like pursuing this different interest and this different skill added to like all different aspects of my creativity so much. Like it's excited me so much because it's the thing I am drawn to. And what you were saying on people trying to figure out like the business aspect and like what are all these things and how do these pieces fit together? I get it, because it's like there is an element of that. Like if you truly want to make your creativity into your business, you got to put your business hat on about it, and you've got to think, okay, how can I make this something that is sustainable? How can I make it something that's scalable? How can I make it something that consistently brings in revenue? Otherwise, you don't have a business.
Right.
But that is a different hat that you're wearing to, okay, what do I actually want to create? What do I actually want to explore? What actually turns me on and makes me feel excited and satisfied? And that usually is messy as fuck. And it's usually a whole bunch of different things. And you giving yourself the freedom to move between things and explore things and be like, this is something that I was obsessed with and I did it fully, but my energy is here now and I want to explore this thing. And instead of being like, well, I said I'm someone who makes this type of thing, so I can't do that. No, like, why? To who? Like, if your goal is to feel like excited and alive and to be able to explore, as you said, your creative evolution, your only job is to follow those pulls, follow those like little twinges of inspiration. And I think when we do that, that is our act of staying in momentum. And staying in momentum, being consistent, doesn't mean doing the same thing over and over again. It means showing up for your creativity over and over again and growing as an artist as a whole,
Yeah.
regardless of what medium that might look like at the time. And being okay with that, maybe not being the most direct path. And like, this is something we've spoken about a lot and that I will constantly fucking scream about. Like, creativity is the antithesis of productivity. Creativity is not about picking a niche and picking one thing and doing that thing forever. It's like, it's just not. And this comes back to like what we were talking about with, you know, you are going to have the more direct path if you pick one thing and you do that one thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Truly, like if you pick a niche, it's going to be a quicker rise to whatever, you know, monetary success level you want, because that is the way the world works. Like, of course it is. It just makes logistical sense. But it's probably not going to satisfy you
Right.
as a creative. And if your goal is to make things and let yourself explore your creative expression, I am okay with, like, my end goal isn't a monetary number. My end goal isn't like, I made this number of revenue this month, so that is, I feel good about my life. No, my end goal is like, I keep letting myself bring the ideas to life that I feel excited about.
Right. And you're allowing yourself to have fun, for God's sakes. Like,
Right?
hold
And I
up.
think it can sound really naive and really whatever, like childlike, but like that is the bones of creativity. And that is where like so many people, I think, are missing out on the joy that they could be experiencing in life if
Right.
they just let themselves follow that, like where they feel pulled, where they feel drawn to, let themselves create the things and indulge these parts of themselves that might feel silly or unnecessary, but it's going to feel really fucking good.
Yeah. And this all goes back to what we were talking about earlier, how it's like you're trying all these new things because that's you. And that's why they're so successful, right? It's like that's unique to people who are experiencing you. Like you can't go anywhere else and get a Gabby original fucking coffee mug because that's you exploring. That's fun. Like it can't be replicated. And I think like that's a big part of creativity that people get fucked up. It's like you can't just like if I were to start making mugs that looked exactly like yours, that's not me having fun. That's me trying to marketing and your business plan, right? Like that's a whole other thing than creativity. And I think especially in the online space, it's a huge issue because we all want to rise to the top fast. So anybody's kind of willing to do whatever it takes to get there. And I hate to say it, but like shit does not happen. Does not maybe for some, like the 1% of people, but like most of us have these journeys, have these experiences of creativity that have led us into the person that we're sitting here talking as. and it's beautiful. Like I wouldn't trade any of that for any amount of wealth, right?
Absolutely. It's like, it's just understanding what game you're playing. And I think it can be really easy, like in the online space, to get caught up in the numbers of it and like, oh, well, this person has this much followers, or this person said they made this much in a month. Why am I not doing that? Should I be changing my strategy? Should I be doing this and this and that? And it can feel very easily to be pulled in all these different directions. But that's kind of why it's important to like, you have to filter out the fucking noise. You have to be like, is this what I want to be paying attention to? And because now we are inundated with so much noise,
Yes.
it only becomes more and more important to be like, do I need to unfollow this person? Do I need to mute this person? Because is this the direction that I want to be led in?
Yeah.
And it's difficult. Like if you are online and if you are using the internet as a tool in your creative practice, which I 10 out of 10 recommend, you've got to be very vigilant with it, and you've got to take responsibility for where you are putting your attention,
Yes.
purely because no one else is going to take responsibility for it for you. Like these apps are not going to be like, well, we've given her too much, let's be nice to her today, let's not give her like overload of comparisonitis. No, the app's like, we want you to stay on to this thing. So like whether you feel good or whether you feel shit, if you're staying on the app for longer, that works for us. The
Right.
responsibility is on us to be like, is this the story that I want to listen to? Is this the narrative that I want for my own life? And how can I curate the things I'm paying attention to lead me in the direction I actually want to go? It's not easy, because it's very easy to go into like a scroll hole and to feel like you should be doing all of these different things, and to compare everything you're doing with all of these other things that other people are doing.
Yeah.
And it's a slow game. Like you said, like it's a slow game to evolve as yourself.
It
Like to get to know yourself and your style, it's slow.
It's very slow and it changes fucking all the time. So like like people are always asking like, how do you find your style? And I'm like, go through some shit. You'll figure it out.
Still figuring it out. That's the thing. It's like, it's not a destination.
Right. Right.
And like I really want it to be a destination, you know? I'm not gonna lie, like I want to be able to be like, tick, found my style, found the thing I'm gonna do forever, because that feels neat and that feels safe and it feels like you've got control of things. But if we really look at it, I would fucking hate that.
Right.
I'd hate it.
Fucking robots after a week and a half, right? Like it's just
Right?
doesn't make sense. It does sound nice, like to be like, oh, this is my thing. And I see people all the time who have kind of like done this, especially in the graphic design world. Like they've created certain techniques and that's like all they promote, but they're also making money off of it because they're selling it,
Yeah.
right? But it seems that's like all they're doing. And that's what you said, you have to like watch what you're taking in because it's like, are they really doing this or is this just a facade to make money? And most of the time, it's a facade to make money. So and it's funny that you bring that up because I recently I fucking deleted 2,000 followers, not followers, but people
Wow.
following because
Yeah.
I noticed the same thing. I was like, my energy is getting caught up. And it wasn't because like I was so fucking mad at anybody or whatever, but it was just like,
Accidental, right?
I'm like, do I need to be consuming this? And a lot of it, and I hate to say this, but it was my client's Instagram, and it's like they're money coaches or business coaches. And I'm like, why am I consuming this if that's not what I want to be looking at? Right. Like, so I made it a very specific intention to go in. I'm like, you follow creatives, you follow artists, you follow fucking thought leaders, because otherwise you don't need it. That's just where I am.
Totally.
It's no
Like
fucking
you
judgment.
are what you eat. Like we think who we are, like our style, our artist expression, like who we are just in our personalities, it is literally just an amalgamation of everything we've taken in throughout our lives. So like we are our families, we are the place we grew up, where every book we've read and every film that we've seen, and we're also like everything we see on social media, like they're tiny like microscopic bits of us. But I think it's too important to let it just be something that happens to us, and letting it something that's just, we're kind of ignorant to our power in it.
Yeah.
Like, I would much rather be more and more intentional about what I'm consuming. And like, I'm not perfect at it. Like, absolutely, I do it as well. Like, and follow shit that I'm like, this isn't helping me. Like, let's go on that unfollow spree. But like, and it's the difference between, you know, it's like dopamine hit of like how easy it is to get really exciting shit into your brain. It's so much easier to like scroll through TikTok and feel just instantly like satiated or whatever. But it's not a lasting feeling. Like, yeah, it's harder to sit and read a book for 2 hours. Like,
Yes.
there's so much more resistance to that, because of course it's not as exciting to look at like black letters on a white page is not as exciting as like
No.
mad scrolling through TikTok or whatever. But how you feel afterwards is different.
Yes. Yes. And like
And that's why we need to be like vigilant with our responsibility of where we're putting our attention.
100%, because like I deleted TikTok from my phone because I found myself doing it before bed, and I was like, I'm just gonna keep going and like blah blah blah. Long story short, like 2 hours later, I'm still on my fucking phone, and I'm like, you could have been doing, like, it just shows me I could have been doing something more productive or resting or doing something that actually like, matters to my body and my mind, and I'm just like, just fucking delete it. Like, is it really giving you anything? Like, I know you use yours for your business, but mine was just like fucking fart videos and monkey video. I just,
I always forget about TikTok. I don't know like what it is. I think it's because I've been doing this thing where I'm trying to be more and more purposeful about it, that whenever I'm scrolling on something, it doesn't always happen instantly, but I will ask myself like, is this how I want to be? Like, is this really satisfying?
yeah.
And like, the more I do that, the quicker I get to be like, I'm just gonna close this app and like go read a book or go for a walk or like make some food or like anything that is so much more enjoyable to do. And it is that thing, I think, of constantly reminding yourself. And it doesn't, it's, if you haven't been doing that, it doesn't feel easy straight away, but it gets easier and easier. And especially like, I don't know, like there are so many movies that I haven't read. There are so many books I haven't read, and
Right.
documentaries and things that I will watch or listen to, or like there's actual stuff to consume that I know will fucking change my life, that will get me so excited. And I think like to get all psychological about it, to change your behavior, it's the best technique isn't to like shame or like punish yourself for doing something of like, oh my God, you're such a stupid bitch for scrolling on TikTok again. That's not really gonna like be helpful. And it's probably not gonna be helpful to be like, you're not allowed to use any social media and you can only read like this one book. Like, your brain is like, fuck no, we're not doing that. That's hell no. And it's going to rebel against you because, of course. Instead, it's like, how can you make the thing you want to do more attractive? So you're choosing that actively because you want to. And you're like, yeah, this is the easy option to sit and to scroll. But I would feel way better if I just like watched this documentary,
That's a
or
really,
if I went to
yeah.
walk and listened to a podcast. And like, it's about getting turned on about the thing that's actually more positive for you, instead of feeling like it's a punishment, like closing TikTok and opening the most boring fucking book that you're not interested in is not going to work.
Right.
Soz.
That's a really good way to put it, though. Just like fucking sugarcoat the shit out of whatever else to do. Like,
There's so much more stuff that you will be more excited to look at and put your attention towards. And yet it might take a little bit more effort. Like, I literally keep lists of movies that I want to watch and things that I want to read. Like, I have a stack of books all the time. So I'm like,
she,
which is the one I want to pick up? Which is the one I want to read right now that I will get more satisfaction from, you know?
yeah, yeah, 100%. And I was like, I was like, she does have all the books. To watch her Instagram
I have a lot of
stories. You'll
books.
see all the living room. It's like I always love our conversations because I feel like I'm very, and not to say you're not emotional based, but like I don't study anything. Like I don't read. Like this is gonna make me sound like a fucking idiot, but like I don't read a lot. I don't do a lot of research. Like it's just very flowy for me. I'm like a little fucking fish over here. And you, like, you're just like, no, I read this in a book once. Here's the quote. Here's the thing. And I'm like, I can fucking back it up, baby. Like,
I mean, I think if you don't like reading, like if you're like, I just don't like it, then there's so many other ways to take in information or to feel excited about stuff. Like there's a weird like hierarchy around like reading, which is weird. I think it's like whatever excites you. It's just reading is just from being little has always been a thing I've loved. But I think it's like it's just having those things readily available or like letting yourself be excited about them. Like when I say like movies that I like to watch, like I will get so much inspiration from watching a fucking Seth Rogen movie than I will from scrolling on TikTok. Like it doesn't have to be something that's like intellectually brilliant or anything. Like your inspiration can come from anything and anywhere. And the value of it is like, is it something that genuinely excites you?
right. Because I do all the time. Like I'm not in a mind space to be an intellectual person right now. I'm like I want to sit in
You're
my
like, no, don't want that.
I want to smoke a little weed and I just want to be fucking dumb,
Exactly.
right? So it's like I watch Bob's Burgers to fall asleep to. It's the stupidest show in the world, but I love it and it makes me so happy to watch to go before bed. Like whatever.
Absolutely. And like you will get so much more enjoyment from that than whatever happens to come up on your social media
Yeah,
stream.
most of the time on TikTok, I end up just like scaring the shit out of myself because it's like conspiracy theories start to show. I'm like, so I don't sleep for like another half an hour because I'm like, dude.
Like I've got things to research now.
Yes, dude. But anyways, back to you before we end this podcast because we've been talking for over an hour now, which I can't believe that because it feels like 20 minutes to me. I want to know, do you have any like current muses right now for your work?
Ooh, current muses. Okay. Oh, I love that question. Um, I don't know. I don't know that I do. I usually am like really obsessed with someone at a specific time. And right now I don't feel like I am. I feel like I'm very focused on spending time with my own ideas and like literally what we're talking about, like taking in all of this stuff. And now I feel like I need so much time to process things and to put things out that I'm not necessarily like actively taking in specific sources. But that being said, like Rick Rubin is like my love him forever and always. Um, I've been really obsessed with looking up Salvador Dali stuff lately, and I don't know why. Like, I just love an eccentric, creative freak, and he fulfills all of that. Yeah, it's got a
Like,
lot of problematic things about him, like,
yes.
artists tend to have, some of my favorite faves always tend to have. But he's very much, I love people who create their own worlds and like very much have their own distinct style. I think there's so much to learn from people like that because they've gone like full force into who they are as an individual
Yes.
and like being the weirdo and being the person who like while he was alive like stood out in every fucking room. You can't like have a mustache like that and be a wallflower. And I think there's so much to learn as a creative of like, oh, it kind of gives you like free reign to be the biggest fucking weirdo possible
So
and only do the things you want to do and just say like, just fuck off the rest of it. You don't have to pay attention to stuff that you're like, I don't care about that. And you get to go all in on the stuff that excites you and the weird, like you can invent a whole, movement of art because you're having these weird dreams that you're like, I think people should know about the dreams that I have,
you know what's interesting? I'm just
Just
gonna
be,
this may open a whole other hour-long conversation, but
Literally.
like, especially with me coming into like truly who I am and like my ideas and like really not giving a fuck, it's like an interesting thing that happens with artists. Like, because prior to this, I would consider myself very much an introvert, right? Like, didn't like to
Mm.
talk to people. But now that I have this weird fucking confidence about how fucking weird I truly am, I have no problem going into public and like talking. And like, that did take a little bit of work, but like,
Yes.
I would consider myself an extrovert. So it's a very weird, like, transition process that I feel happens when you like get really comfortable with who you are and what you're put on the earth to do, whether that's being an artist or not. Like, do you agree with that? Like, it's just so like there's that in between where you're like, am I gonna do it? Am I not?
Um,
And then you just fucking like go over the edge and you're like, I'm a fucking weirdo. It's fine. We're done.
Dude, I love this so much. I think what it is, because I've thought about this a lot before, like as I've gone through my own life and like claimed my weirdo status even more, and like especially even like claiming like I am an artist, like I can introduce myself to people as an artist, which is like in itself a weird thing to do, right? You don't hear that all the time. It kind of, I think it comes back to like how we understand art as like our communication and our actual form, like true form of expression through our art. And I think before that, or like as I step more and more into, oh, I can show up just exactly as I am, and like as I'm breaking down those things of like, this is what you should do in a social setting, and these are the conversations that people are having, and these are the things that you should talk about. It's stepping away from like, this is what I think anyway. It's stepping away from how we think we should show up socially. And you know, you've always been yourself, like you've always had the ideas that you have. But I think previously it may have been like we've come to social situations or we've come out into the big world and been like, I'm a little weird, so let me just tone that stuff down. Or like, I'm not going to talk about that stuff because no one else is obsessed with Salvador Dali and wants to have a 3 hour conversation about it. So we like minimize that stuff. But that stuff is like all we care about. Like that stuff is like the things we're obsessed with. And so I think the more we create space for that in our own like day-to-day lives and let ourselves indulge in it, then you have more and more confidence to come up into the world of being like, actually the other stuff bores me, and like people don't have to like the same things for you to be able to have a really great conversation with them.
Truly,
You
yeah.
don't actually have to find people who have the exact same interests of you to feel seen and to feel excited to be out into the world speaking with them. And actually what I find more interesting is finding someone who is obsessed with something that's totally different to me, that I'm like, I still don't give a shit about it, but I want you to tell me about why it excites you, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I think as you are getting to know yourself and get more comfortable with yourself, it's that confidence of being like, we don't all have to like the same things, but I can still show up fully as myself. I don't need someone to understand me completely. And I can still have a really good relationship or like have really good conversations with people, even with them being like, oh, she's a bit weird. And it can be fine. It
Right.
can be taught like that can be fine.
Right, because that's how we look at normal people. We're like, oh, they're a bit strange, right? Like it's
Exactly. Like realizing it's not a problem to solve, and actually like it's just a really fun aspect of yourself.
yes. Yes, I fucking love it. All right, Gabby. Now that we have spoken about everything under the sun, a little space here to talk about what you're currently doing, what you're currently offering. I know you said you just had a launch like 10 minutes ago. This bitch is out here launching when she's on a podcast. I love it.
So
So
ridiculous.
people know where they can
Um,
you, all that good shit.
Beautiful. Yeah, I am on pretty much every platform at Gabriella Rosie. I'm mostly on Instagram. I do YouTube videos. What do I do? I make decks of cards. I have a membership for creatives called the Creatrix Coven. Yeah, if you're interested in creativity and being an artist and making things, then that's what I'm obsessed with.
Yes. And everything that she puts out into the world is fucking fire. as a consumer of most of it. I think I've ordered like 80% of her store by at this point. That's Gabriella Rosie, guys. Thank you for joining in. It was so awesome to talk to you. I'm so excited to share you with everybody else. But yeah, we'll see you on the next episode, guys.